Monitors or monitor lizards are a group of reptiles that I am not nearly as well versed in as most of the species that are commonly and uncommonly kept in the hobby. And there's a couple reasons for that. A lot of the reasons why that people end up not getting into monitors or shouldn't be getting into monitors is how intelligent they are, how large they are, how demanding their needs are, how big of enclosure sizes and varied diets and everything that goes into that are required for good basic monitor husbandry. And so, because of that, I don't have that many species. In fact, I only work with one, and that is probably the best species of monitor to work with if you're looking for something small, and that's the Aki monitor, or the spiny tailed monitor from Australia. And so, today, what I'm going to do is talk about 5 species of monitors that can be kept as pets that stay smaller, under 4 feet, that would make good alternatives for the much more popular water monitors, Nile monitors, crocodile monitors that all make very good pets that you all still get that same varanid, because that's the genus that make up all of the monitors is Varanus, that get really good varanid behavior, care, and amazing interactions with. So let's get the ball rolling. I already brought up the Aki monitor. We're not talking about that one because that's a really easy softball choice. So let's get into a different one, the King's monitor, or the King's rock monitor. This is one of the smallest species of monitor out there. In fact, they're even a little bit smaller than the Akis, and they hail from the north part of the Northern Territory, near the Kimberly or in the Kimberly region of the area. If anyone's familiar with the Kimberly region of Australia, it's that red desert, very rocky, very dry and hot. When I said they are one of the smallest ones, I mean it. Typically, nose to tail, they stay just over a foot long. Or for anyone outside of the States, they usually stay under 40 centimeters. They're a little bit more slender bodied than the Aki monitors, and they absolutely need and take advantage of the microclimates that exist in the area. Those rocky, big rocky slopes, outcroppings, boulders, those provide microclimates of not only moisture underneath them, provide enough shade for different little patches of grasslands to appear where they will spend their time not just basking out under that hot, incredibly over 100+ degree sun all day. These guys are very uncommon. You don't see them too often in the hobby, but they are being bred, not at the rate of the Akis again, but they are probably a very good choice for someone who wants to get something a little bit more uncommon, but really wants that really cool monitor interactions, because they're very inquisitive, they're diurnal, they're very curious, they learn to work with people, recognize people on an individual basis. The King's Rock monitors are almost exclusively insectivores in the wild, eating mainly locusts, flies, ants, termites, their larvae, their eggs, as well as a really interesting, cool thing about the King's Rock monitors is that it has been documented by both juveniles and adults. They have been seen poking their tails into crevices and pulling things out. It's kind of like when you see like the eyes or the Madagascar lemurs who have that really long finger and they poke their fingers into holes to pull out insects. It's very similar to that. And so that has been observed, and they think that is a really cool learned behavior. Next up is a good size step up in size and care from the King's Rock monitor, and that is the peach-throated or the peach throat monitor. It's another species that comes not from Australia, but actually from New Guinea and some of the surrounding areas like Biak. That name should be familiar for any green tree python out there. That's where a good chunk of the green tree pythons came from and still do. Now, the peach throat monitor, like I said, is a good step up in size. They typically average 3.5, 4 feet long, and they very rarely exceed 4 feet. It would be a big boy that ever got bigger than about 4 feet. Now, they get their name from, obviously, their throats. Its coloration can be anywhere from white to yellow, orange, even almost a light red, and the varying shades in between there, which a lot of the time looks kind of like a peachy color. Shadaisy. Being from New Guinea, it's obviously much more humid, a little bit more rainforesty. They're found not in incredibly high elevations because there are some reptiles found in that area that are at much higher elevation. So you're going to want to keep it warm, nice and humid. They are very good climbers, diggers, and they do enjoy large water sources. So you wouldn't necessarily need a giant enclosure like you would for the water monitors or Varana Salvatore that for some of them can get over 7 feet long. This one, again, staying just under 4 feet. So you still need a very large enclosure, but not necessarily something quite as big. And the care for them is very similar to that of a water monitor. So if you're looking for that experience and you want that interaction, then you could get a peach throat monitor and then eventually save up expanding room and eventual areas for those much larger Asian water monitors. Sticking with the area of Indonesia, Micronesia, whatever you want to call it, French Polynesia, but taking a big step down in size is the Timor Monitor. Now, the Timor Monitor is considerably smaller, and it comes from, you guessed it, the island of Timor, but there are some other surrounding islands that they're also found in, including Savu. So just throwing a bunch of other names around that people who keep other species, that's probably picking up some light bulbs about the area where they're found. Now, these guys are an almost exclusively arboreal monitor, very similar to like the tree monitors, where that's where they spend most of their time in the wild, is in hollows of trees and logs, and they come out during the day like almost every single monitor out there. They are diurnal, they're active, bright, intelligent hunters. The Timor monitors eat almost entirely insects, just like a lot of the smaller dwarf monitors from Australia. They will eat nesting birds and chicks, probably a few smaller gecko species, maybe even a few small snakes, but they don't really eat a whole lot of mammals. So reptilinks, small eggs, hard-boiled eggs, and then a wide variety of diet is good for them. They're typically the kind of monitor coloration of kind of like a grayish brown color, but they do have these really pretty bright white to yellow spots along their backs. They are a very reactive and darty species. I did have one for a little while, and then when it came time to move the facility, there was someone who I know in the Denver area that was working on getting established a breeding group of Timors, so I rehomed my boy to them. And supposedly he has now seen a lot of breeding behavior from him and the two girls that he is in with most of the time. So, fingers crossed for him. Good luck. But this is definitely one that you need a tall enclosure for because they are arboreal. So it has the traditional arboreal kind of challenges where you need a lot of height, plenty of humidity coming from the New Guinea, Micronesia, Indonesia, islands of Timor, you get it. Areas, lots of humidity, still a good basking spot like almost every single monitor needs, well over 100 degrees. But plenty of room to get away from them, lots of humidity, plenty of hides, and that varied diet like we talked about. Next up is a species of monitor that for a very long time they considered a subspecies of the Timor monitor, and that is the peacock monitor. They've had their own designation for a while, but depending on which biologist or hobbyist you want to fight with on the internet that day, you might end up having that fight between subspecies of Timor and their own species. So, with that in mind, they are very similar to the Timors. About the same size, typically around 2 feet-ish long. They are very arboreal, almost exclusively. They have very similar requirements. Their actual coloration and look is very similar to the Timor, but being the peacock monitor, they typically are a little bit brighter and they have a little bit more spotting to them. Most of their length is actually their tail. About 2/3 of their body length is tail, and they use that to kind of help balance them as they're darting around and running around their enclosures. Again, mostly insectivores. They're a very, very uncommon one that we have here in the States. There are some people who are working on captively breeding them, but they're a really cool species of monitor. Supposedly, they're not quite as, oh my gosh, as the Timor monitors are, but they are still fairly shy, to where once they get comfortable, you'll probably see them out more and won't dart away, but they still aren't real big on the, hey, let's come out and have fun interactions. Last on the list, I'm technically cheating because they do actually get longer than 4 feet, and that is the Quince monitor, or Quince, however anyone in the comments wants to yell at me about it, Quince. They're very closely related to the mangrove monitors, so being much more popular, more is known a little bit more about them, they know that they typically can get close to 5 feet in length. Typically, they stay under 4, but they will get larger than the peach throats, but they are a really popular choice for larger monitor species, other than all the little dwarfs that are still what I think would be a good alternative to the large Niles or Asian water monitors. These guys, like the mangroves, hail from Indonesia and that surrounding area. They think that they come from the Sula Islands, although there is a lot of debate, as I've learned, about whether or not they're truly endemic to there, whether or not they exist in other places, or if they actually migrated there from other islands that they're no longer living. So, yeah. These guys are really cool. Just like the mangrove monitors, they're fairly arboreal. They're found in kind of mangrove, that not necessarily exclusively mangrove swamps, but sometimes brackish water areas with lots of vines, lots of branches. They are very active and avid climbers, being a little bit smaller lizard species. Not to say that larger ones don't climb trees, crocodile monitors. They're a little bit more generalist than most of the species that we talked about already. Even the peach throats, they eat mainly insects and birds. These guys typically eat a much more varied diet. Not only does include birds, eggs, and insects, but they also eat fish. Not as many mammals, but just because of the areas where they live, there aren't as many mammalian prey items, but they do eat more mammals than they do a lot of the other ones. So for someone who's looking for a very, very varied diet, similar to that of like a tegu, or an Asian water monitor, something like the Quince monitor is a good choice. Now, the main reason why these guys are more popular than the mangroves is because of their coloration. I knew you were waiting for me to get to that at some point. These guys are beautiful. These bright yellow and black bumblebee looking monitor lizards. They are so, so cool. That is why they're a little bit more popular, and thus I guess they're not more popular, they're more wanted, more valued. The mangroves are more popular and available because the imports on them is much more widely available and they are less expensive. So if you're looking for what is more than likely going to be a captive born and bred, probably a better idea because they're used to human interactions, because that is a thing. I know we all can poo-poo on monitor people, specifically other very popular people with ponytails, about kind of the hijinks that they get up to, but they do benefit from interactions with people. And a captive born and bred Quince monitor or any other monitor species is a good leg in the right direction as you're learning to work with varanid behavior. The Quince monitors, being the largest on the list, obviously need the largest enclosures. A lot of people will put them in something like a very oversized grow tent. I don't know the longevity of that direction to go into, because monitor claws are expensive, and heck, even a startle monitor who will tail whip, because even the little ones will tail whip, will rip right through a grow tent. So I'm not sure about the longevity of that, but maybe a smaller one as you get used to their behavior and learn what they need. But again, big high basking spot, big varied diet, supplemented with vitamins and calcium powder. Whole prey items are beneficial when you can, so smaller fish, very intermediately rodents, because again, none of the monitors on the list today were really rodent eaters in general, but they're all really, really cool. Didn't get too much into the husbandry of all of them, because again, not super well versed about their actual husbandry other than the Ackie monitor, just telling you about some really cool species of monitors. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. I have a whole playlist of a bunch of other top 5, whatever, they're not necessarily the top, but top 5 videos. If you want to check out that playlist, helps me out. Hit that bell notification, like, and subscribe, let you know when I'm doing more content. I'm going to be doing a bunch of other really cool stuff. Sorry it took me so long to talk more about the actual monitor lizards. It's just a little bit more difficult for me to do that because there is a lot of research to go into it. It takes a lot of time because I don't know as much about them. But hopefully you got something out of today's video. If you were considering getting a monitor lizard, maybe you weren't thinking about one of these 5, but hey, maybe did something come across your path, and the next time you're at a big reptile show and you happen to see one of those on there, you go, hey, I remember that, let's get one of those instead of the not necessarily imported, unhealthy, or whatever, but not necessarily the best choice monitor lizards. And for all the people that were thinking I was going to bring up the Savannah monitors, I can do a whole video about Savannah monitors and why they're not necessarily the best beginner or even intermediate level of monitor out there. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to talk about that at all. But again, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.